Okay, welcome back, everyone. If you could take your seats. If you could take your seats, everyone, we're going to get going with the second half, the final part of today. And if I could have your attention for those of you who've registered for tomorrow morning's field trip. So to visit the Sludge to Energy and future phosphorus recovery facilities of Wien-Energie. So many of you have registered for this. And to be able to actually go on the visit, you need to fill out a form that effectively constitutes a safety check. Apparently it's just a few simple questions. You should have received a link to this form by email. Ludwig is going to resend the email to all of you. So you need to answer the questions. You'll then get a confirmation email saying you've been approved a safe visitor. And importantly, you need to forward that confirmation email to Arabelle Aman, who we met yesterday here from Wien-Energie. So 1, you need to fill out the form, and 2, you need to send on the resulting confirmation to Arabelle Aman, and her email address will also be in the original email telling you need to do this. I've been told that if you don't follow this 2-step procedure, you won't be going on the trip. So please do it if you haven't already. And for those of you who've registered, I think the trip is full now, so if you haven't, this isn't relevant to you. But the bus will be leaving at 9 o'clock sharp, hence it says 8:30 in the program, from outside the hotel here. So that's for tomorrow morning. And for those of you who've signed up for the social event this evening, which is also full, the bus is leaving at 7 p.m. sharp. No bus. We're just meeting 7 p.m. sharp downstairs in the lobby of the hotel, outside in front of the hotel, even in the conference area. So be around here at 7 o'clock tonight if you've signed up for this evening. That's it on practicalities. I think if you have any questions, Ludwig is in the front row here, so grab him in the next coffee break, and I'm sure he'll be able to help. We wanted to kick off this afternoon then with a report back from the 3 parallel sessions that took place just before lunch. And we're going to kick off. I know all the rooms were moved around at the last moment, so I won't say session 1, 2, or 3 because I'm no longer sure which is which. But we're going to kick off with the hybrid session, the Emerging Nutrient Recovery Technology session, and we've got Ana Suarez to report back from that, Professor of Biotechnology Engineering at Cranfield University in the UK. Ana, tell us what some of us missed.
Okay, well, thank you so much for the invitation to provide a summary about our wonderful session on emerging nutrient recovery technologies, and I think it's quite clear that nutrient recovery is very important. I mean, we've been hearing about it all the way from plenary sessions to many other parallel sessions as well. So our session was quite intense. So there were 8 presentations of 10 minutes each. And although it was intense, as I was saying, what was really interesting was to show how much of work is being done in this area and the relevance of this area is definitely a very, very hot topic where, you know, a lot of us are spending quite a little bit of time and effort and putting our brains into it. So as the name of the session indicates, it was based on emerging technologies, and the great speakers then described technologies all the way from TRL level 5 all the way to 9, so there was once again quite a lot of diversity there. And we also see that, you know, we do not just focus on phosphorus, but there was quite a lot of emphasis on nitrogen removal. So we know nitrogen is a very important greenhouse gas, and also we spend a lot of energy trying to produce nitrogen-based fertilizers. So why not recover it from wastewater? Because we need to remove it anyway. So why not try to merge the two things? And so the fascinating aspect of the session was that diversity once again, and then we had presentations that were focused on industrial wastewater. So we had piggery slurries, we had aquaculture-based wastewaters, We had sludge dewatering liquors, so streams with extremely high concentrations of nutrients. We see that phosphorus recovery and removal steam mainly happens through struvite in those wastewaters with very high concentration, which does make sense in many ways. But we start to see the emergence of new things, such as ion exchange processes, new absorbent. So we had a really interesting presentation about using crab shells to make new absorbents, and we can retain the nutrients within these absorbents and directly apply them to land. We also saw presentations focusing sort of on achieving very low phosphorus concentrations from various streams, mainly focus on mainstream municipal wastewater treatment. And we saw sort of once again ion exchange processes. Iron-based coagulants are not so attractive anymore because there's problems with storage, there's problems with supply. So what are the other options to recover and remove phosphorus from mainstream? And also a very interesting presentation on new developments on MBBR technologies as a way to intensify phosphorus removal. And we also saw about use of new coagulants, nature-based coagulants, natural color coagulants, as a way to remove phosphorus, but also improve other aspects of the treatment, and thinking about then operator health and safety, which I think is quite important. There was also a presentation on ashes and recovery of white phosphorus from ashes, also very interesting. And in relation to the products, we had all sorts of things coming up, from phosphoric acid to white phosphorus, as I was mentioning, ammonium sulfate, nutrient-concentrated streams, and all the speakers took a great deal of care to present the purity of the product. So this is something that it's very clear priority for everyone, that there's a market out there and there's a use out there for whatever we recover, and we all understand how important it is to have a lot of information about pollutants, contaminants, pathogens, etc. that exist in those products. So overall, very, very interesting. I think sort of from my side, what I would like to have seen a little bit more was more reference to net zero targets, because although this technology is very interesting, emerging, but how do they could be applied in the future? Are they aligned with the industry pressures on net zero targets? I mean, it was clear that these new technologies use a lot of chemicals. Are we going to be sustainable moving into this route? So I think we need to align and work more in multidisciplinary teams to understand the overarching impacts of what we're doing. Also, these technologies are completely different from what we're currently doing in many industries. So there's a need for training a lot of people that can operate these new plants that are coming up soon. And yeah, it's something that we need to be doing pretty quickly, because the targets are there within the next decade or so. And also we need to be collaborating more with supply chains. Lots of this amazing recovered products, high purity. What are we going to do with them? So we need to start combining and thinking about those supply chains a little bit more carefully now. So when the technologies are implemented, we're ready to go. I think that's my 5 minutes of fame. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Anna, and great to have these three messages at the end, things you would have liked to see more of. So that's really useful feedback, I think, and points we haven't had raised before. So thank you very much for that. Our next parallel group we'll go to, which was originally the first one, new fertilizers for nutrient sustainability. And Chris Thornton kindly volunteered to rapporteur that. Chris, I imagine familiar to most of you, he heads up the European Sustainable Phosphorus Platform.
Can I have the slides? So the session was about recycled fertilizers and phosphorus in soil and how those interact. We had 3 presentations from effectively work which is undergoing in the Lex for Bio project, addressing results of pot trials, addressing different phosphorus extraction methods to try and assess how available the phosphorus is in different fertilizing materials, and looking in column experiments, soil column experiments, at to what extent the use of these different recycled fertilizers leads to phosphorus leaching, in each case comparing to a standard mineral phosphorus fertilizer. And I think what is important is using not only a range of very different recycled phosphorus materials, but also different European soils. We had a presentation looking at the interactions between soil, fertilizer application levels, and crop phosphorus offtake, so in effect phosphorus balances, and the risk of nutrient losses in the Ebro Basin, so again looking at the interaction between fertilizer and soil. And a presentation from the Fertimanure project on their pilot producing and testing, again, a range of different types of tailor-made recycled nutrient materials, in this case produced from poultry and pig manure. And finally, we had a comparative consequential life cycle assessments of different organic products, so different organic secondary products being used as fertilizers, compared to microbe or bacterial produced biomass being used as a fertilizer, again, compared to mineral fertilizers. So next slide. So rather than summarizing each presentation, because you will have the slides afterwards and the abstracts are in the abstract book, some takeaways which maybe the people at the workshop will not entirely disagree with, or they'll think I've missed the point, but it was not possible to verify this immediately afterwards. So the first one is that most of the recycled nutrient materials tested in the given experimental conditions, of course, and in the different soils, showed crop fertilizer effectiveness for phosphorus comparable to mineral fertilizers. So I've not used the term phosphorus use efficiency or phosphorus uptake because it was measured in different ways. But overall, these recycled materials showed to be pretty much as effective, and in some cases as effective or even marginally more effective than mineral phosphorus fertilizer. Secondly, an extremely high variability between different recycled fertilizer materials, and that was logical because the materials covered very variable materials, ash, pelletized manure, struvite, so extremely different varied materials, composts, but also very high variability depending on the soil type, the amount of carbon in the soil pH, and also, importantly, on the form of phosphorus in the recycled fertilizer, which is not easy to analyze, the carbon content of the recycled fertilizer, and of course, something which tends to be forgotten because it's so obvious, the size of the granules. And we know from other work that the size of struvite granules impacts how rapidly they're available, which is so obvious that people tend to not consider it. One of the conclusions is that soil Olsen phosphorus, which is the way soil phosphorus is often measured in many countries, not everywhere, can be inadequate to predict phosphorus fertilizer need or to predict phosphorus loss. And finally, the life cycle analysis. In the conditions and the limits with which it was carried out, like any life cycle analysis, generally came to the conclusion that the mineral fertilizers had a better life cycle analysis than algal or biologically generated biomass, and even better, the worst ones were the organic byproducts. But that will maybe depend on whether waste was being used as an input or whether the byproduct could in fact have been used in animal feed or something else. So those are the takeaways that I've taken out. If there are other people who are at the workshop who think I've missed something fundamental, then please raise your hand either now or afterwards. Or come and complain to me.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that very clear summary, Chris. no one rushing up to grab you by the throat, so that's probably a good sign yet. Thank you very much for that. And our final parallel workshop was a policy-focused one, Policies and Regional Actions for Phosphorus Sustainability. And it's Jen Metzen reporting back from that, Associate Professor and Docent of Ecological and Environmental Modeling at Linköping University in Sweden.
Great. So I think the red thread in our session was really that multiple goals need to be met, and we're asking ourselves, well, where does phosphorus really fit into meeting these multiple goals? Some of the presentations were more about how phosphorus really needs to be explicitly spelt out in order for us to get those benefits with multiple goals, while other presentations focused more around when we are only looking at phosphorus, we're missing some of these other considerations and goals that actually do interact and will affect outcomes. So we start at the EU level with a spatially explicit model for agricultural soils that is being developed so that we can better explore scenarios and the effect of different EU policies on phosphorus across the EU and in a way that is compatible with how we model carbon and nitrogen, so we can look at those interactions. Then we had a presentation about the new Common Agricultural Policy and looking at how do those measures actually tackle phosphorus. And the analysis there shows that although there are some measures that do specifically talk about phosphorus and can be quite beneficial, they're mostly voluntary or quite vague in how they're formulated. So it may or may not have the impact that we want to see. It's going to be a lot to member states to see how strong they're going to want to be on those regulations. There was an analysis a little bit looking into how Germany is using that flexibility. And in the case of Germany, they're pretty much sticking to minimum standards that follow EU at the moment. Staying in Germany, we also heard from a funding scheme that's looking at 7 projects that are looking at recycling phosphorus on a regional scale, so looking at sustainability impact assessments as well as overcoming some of these barriers to have broader and better use of these technology options. Finally, in Germany, we heard a little bit more about recovering phosphorus from ash from Berlin in sewage sludge ash, finding that yes, of course we can, and we should do it, but there are actually a lot of logistical considerations that we need to think about. So the carbon footprint, for example, might not always be great when we think about removing heavy metals, which we need to do, and where do we store acid, how do we transport, should it be done on site or not? We do need to think a little bit more systemically with regards to that. Then we took a train to Finland forests, where recovery and sustainability has been more focused on energy. So when they track phosphorus, but also nitrogen, potassium, and calcium, they're kind of along for the ride, and which might mean that phosphorus is not being used in the best way that it could be from a fertilizer's perspective. So there's maybe some opportunities there. And we take a train back down to Italy, where we looked at a treatment plant in Bologna that's looking at the feasibility of recovery of stervrite, which of course is possible, but finding a market has been challenging, and they're hopeful that with the new EU fertilizer regulations coming in, there might be more opportunities for that. Finally, we go to the Netherlands and look at phosphorus flows in the Delftland and Hague region, but not just looking at flows, also thinking about how are those flows governed and what's controlling what we're seeing in those phosphorus flows and opportunity spaces. So in the case of the Netherlands, governance around environmental protection is probably driving how we're seeing a lot of those flows, but that's not the only opportunity space we can look at in terms of better nutrient management for cities and how they fit into a global landscape. So there was a suggestion that we should be looking a little bit more systematically and systemically at what are the major flows that we're seeing, what are the measures that we could take to alter those flows, and what are the policies that already exist in our frameworks that are being used or could be used, not just for phosphorus, but potentially for carbon actions on cities, existing urban planning frameworks, so that we can look at win-wins and potential trade-offs so that phosphorus doesn't get forgotten, and that we're maximizing some of those co-benefits and getting the really transformational changes that we need to see for phosphorus cycling. Thanks.
Thank you very much for that, and also, like Anna did, introducing a broader dimension, and I guess getting us to think beyond specifically phosphorus-oriented policies, what other kind of policies there are and how those might impact flows of nutrients like phosphorus, notably the Common Agricultural Policy. And as as Anne also mentioned, net zero climate policies, energy policies, and so forth. That's it from our parallel sessions. A final round of applause to our 3 rapporteurs. And you're welcome to stay up there, or you can move to another seat, as you wish. So the second part of this is another series of short vision statements, this time from some of the ESPC4 sponsors. There's 3 of them, and I'd like to welcome Per Larssons up first, Chief Sustainability Officer at the Rag & Cells Group, Sweden's leading environmental management, recycling and waste management company. And their subsidiary, one of them is Easy Mining, which aims to close nutrient cycles.
Thank you so much. I will do a history tour and then come to the present and then move into the future. Rag & Cells, we are a waste management company, but we started as a transport company in 1881 when we transported goods and people with horses. Already back then, we also brought latrines back from the inner city of Stockholm to the suburbs, producing food. So bringing nutrients back has been the core of the company, the core of our DNA. The present owner of Rag & Cells, the 3 siblings to their grandfather, are really caretakers of the environment. So when they were introduced to Dr. Yariv Cohen in 2007, they decided to invest in Easy Mining. And a couple of years later, we acquired the whole company. So it's now the part of Rag & Cells Group, and it's our innovation company focusing on nutrients. My background, I have worked for more than 20 years in the food industry, and I had a dream. I had a dream of producing sustainable food. The problem is that you can choose by either conventional farming or organic farming. But I say none of those will function. Anyhow, back then I developed a system how we can integrate our sustainability vision with our consumers' behavior. And in 2008 and 2009, this was honored on a global level and recognized. So just ahead of the COP15 conference in Copenhagen, the failure conference, I was invited to do a short vision statement. And I was traveling around the world and speaking about the science behind what we have done. And the conference organizers told me that, please come down. And I asked, how many minutes can I speak? Well, you can speak for 1 minute. 1 minute? Yes, it's you, it's Tony Blair and Gro Harlem Brundtland. Okay, I take my 1 minute. Besides me, there was another fellow also presenting and giving 1 minute. And his name was Professor Johan Rockström. And he was then presenting the science behind the 9 planetary boundaries. That is today the basic in our how we are doing our business development. Also the basics when it comes to Easy Mining's contribution when it comes to phosphorus and the nutrient cycle. Now we'll go into what we are contributing to the future. Well, of course, ash to phos, one of the processes will bring back phosphorus to the fertilizers, or even to the organic farming going forward, if we have the possibility, or even maybe as a feed phosphate, because the quality is the purest you can today is offered to the market. We extract more than 96% of the heavy metals. You can't detect any cadmium in the end product. And what we will do with the heavy metals? We have already signed an agreement with the smelters. So the copper, the zinc will not be put on the fields. It will go back and become new copper cables. So we'll really create a 100% circular solution. We're now setting up the first 2 factories, in the first one in Sweden and the second one in Germany. We just need to pass the environmental permit process, and then of course we have a plan for going forward. When it comes to the nutrient solution, we have already installed our first installation, a full-scale industrial plant, and it's now in place in the city of Copenhagen in a collaboration with Biofos that will extract a lot, more than 96% of the nutrient from the react water. And of course, when we met Professor Mark Sutton at the COP26, because rank cells and easy mining, of course, we understand the potential on the global level. We met him at the COP26 conference, and Professor Sutton, when he saw our invention and our potential, he asked, how quickly can you have hundreds of those factories up and running? And I switched to the next slide. Well, in my plan, it's 10,000 just in Europe. And of course, this is not a vision. For me, it's really a purpose. We would like to contribute to a better society and make sure that we can bring nutrients back to the world. And then we need legislation that are based on quality, not on a region. That was my message when I spoke on the 18th of May in Geneva at the World Trade Organization, invited for the second time. And you can find my presentation on the public WTO webpage. And if you would like to have more information about what we're doing, you can also participate in the next week's session, where I will do a keynote when France are ending their EU presidency in Grenoble. And then I will have 50 minutes to speak about our innovations. So, but last and not least, if you're here tomorrow, we will also do a reception at the Swedish Embassy and deep dive into those innovations. So if any one of you are here, I might squeeze in one or two. So please come to me afterwards, and I will give you an opportunity. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for that. And also various calendar updates for those of you able and lucky enough to make them. Thank you very much. Our second speaker in this little series is Wolfgang Hofmeier, Industry Relations Manager for the Borealis Group. So here, a chemicals company based here in Vienna. Go ahead. So a local.
Yeah, what a marvelous evening yesterday. Great dancing. Thank you very much, Mr. President. Yes. He made it possible when we requested to open the dance floor. Thank you. You are proving that you are taking care of the social aspect of sustainability. Thanks. Yeah, coming to our statement. Yeah. I need to go forward. 3 simple messages from our side why we decided to sponsor this exciting conference. We thought we today can announce that we are already recycling phosphorus, and I give you the update and few simple messages. First message, I would say, is fertilizer is a logistics business. You see here not primarily that we are a big company, but beside the 6 fertilizer production sites, it is the full points. Each point is a warehouse we are driving by ourselves. Yeah? Alone in Austria, 400 retailers are offering our products in 1,000 warehouses. Yeah? And you are aware that farmers are using fertilizers around, is it 8 or 10 weeks a year, and the production process is running 12 months. Yeah? So it is a huge challenge to motivate all the retailers to pick up our products just in time. Otherwise, our plant in Linz, 3,000 tons per day, is running over, and we would need to stop. Left-hand or right-hand side, health, safety, energy and climate, and circular economy. These are values for us, and it's important. We do not only offer products, we offer also more and more services. And a nice cooperation beside Wien Energy and MA48 in Vienna is in Lower Austria a high school for agriculture, for plant production. This picture here is showing you a site-specific application card for nitrogen demand. And these young farmers are really keen and really smart in not only testing what is available on the market, but developing their NutriZones app, what we then are allowed to communicate together with them. This is all open source, this is all for free, and the farmers, the young farmers, are trying them out. And one of the managers tells me the very fast knowledge transfer is one of the big wins and one of the big good issues of this digitalization. Yeah, smart farming, precision farming is a topic and helps to go forward on reducing losses, etc. Not only on the nitrogen planning and application, they are working on soil erosion, they are working on reduced phosphorus losses into the surface water. Yeah, you know we are a partner of Wien Energy and Fertilizers Europe. We try really to close this nutrient loop. Yeah, this is an exciting development for us, and we are proud, not only proud, but we know it is a responsibility to go forward on that way. We are convinced mono-incineration is the right way, so Wien Energy, MA48, are delivering to us a standardized, purified, new raw material. And we replace the fossil rock phosphate from North Africa. We then take care that the quality aspects of the fertilizers are still taken into account. Modern agriculture needs high quality fertilizers. Is it the solubility? Is it the spreadability of the fertilizers? This is still the high level we need to fulfill. Many thanks to Wien Energy, many thanks to my young colleagues. I have with me Markus, Barbara, and our experienced product manager. You see, we take this serious. We believe in this conference and in the new way which is upcoming. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that, for paying tribute indeed to yesterday evening, and also to the next generation, the young people, as you say, who are going to make all these things happen. That's the plan. The final sponsor we're going to hear from, we're staying in Vienna, is Wien Energie. Teresa Schubert, a process engineer with a strong focus on the environment, and currently a research specialist at Wien Energie focused on renewable energy and circular economy.
Thank you very much. Welcome from my side, from Wien Energie side again. My name is Teresa Schubert, and I would like to introduce today here our vision behind Waste to Value, our research project, which we perform in a consortium. I saw some members of the consortium already in the audience. And I would like to introduce to you the vision behind this research project. We, as urban energy provider and operator of waste incineration or waste treatment plants, have the responsibility to utilize the resources of the city of Vienna in an optimal way, in a waste minimizing and value maximizing way. And on the other hand, we want to provide green energy for the city, for the infrastructure, and will need in the future green fuels and green chemicals to ensure the operation of the infrastructure. And these two aspects are linked within the project Waste to Value, where we aim to develop a process change which converts waste materials into green fuels and green chemicals. So how does it work? So hopefully yes, now it works. The process, the technology we are developing with the Technological University of Vienna and mainly BEST as lead in the consortium is a three-step process consisting of gasification, gas cleaning, and then a subsequent synthesis which converts the product gas into our value, our products, green gases, green fuels, green chemicals. The input materials, for example, waste wood or residues which can't be recycled anymore, or also sewage sludge, which is of high interest here, I think, consist mainly of carbon, oxygen, and hydrogen in quite complex structures. Within this chemical structure, the energy is bound chemically, and in the first process step, the so-called gasification, these materials are decomposed into their building blocks and give a product gas containing mainly carbon monoxide, hydrogen, but also carbon dioxide. And within this product gas, so-called syngas, the energy is converted into this gas and then can be used further. Before the final process occurs, there are certain small elements as well, contaminants in this product gas, impurities, contaminants like tars or sulfur, which have to be removed in the second process step, the so-called gas cleaning. So in different gas cleaning steps, these impurities are removed and maybe in the future can be recovered as well. And the remaining product gas, the syngas, then is finally converted. These building blocks are put together in a form which is similar to our fossil fuels today, but from biogenic origin or renewable origin. In our case, we use the so-called Fischer-Tropsch synthesis, which puts together these building blocks into long chains, which are similar to crude oil and can then be processed, refined into something which is similar, for example, of our conventional diesel. That's, for example, the application we in the project will realize. We will use it as diesel input for the Wiener Linien buses, which you might have used here in Vienna already. This process chain that I introduced here is not commercially available yet. And that's the reason why we are performing this research project. We built and operate within the consortium, under the lead of BEST, a 1 megawatt demonstration plant. All the people that are here and will or already have filled out the form, which was mentioned at the beginning of this session, have the opportunity to see this demo plant tomorrow at our site, Simmeringer Heide. That's a research site, a research demonstration plant, where we focus on generating data and finding the optimal process chain to make this vision we have come true. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that. And I hope many of you have signed up for the site visit tomorrow to see it in real life. That brings to a close the series of vision statements from the sponsors. And to conclude this next bit, we are going to hear from a series of phosphorus platforms in Europe and further afield, with each of them setting out, giving you a flavor of their experience to date and what they plan to do in the coming months and years. So first of all, Chris, back to Chris Thornton, to talk about the European Sustainable Phosphorus Platform.
So I shall try to be rapidly, because I think you've probably guessed who I am by now. So firstly, I want to thank the members of our platform. They're here because without our members, we would not exist. Many of our members have spoken over the last 2 days to present their vision, why they're involved with this platform. And thank you again to our members. You make the platform possible, partly by funding it, but above all by providing your energy, your input, and your ideas. So what do? We function, I think there may be 3 key words here. The first is consensus. We try to bring together the different industries, the different sectors, the different interests who are involved in the future of phosphorus to try and find shared positions to take things forward to a more sustainable future. That's not always easy because the positions are sometimes conflictual, and we've seen some of that with the discussions around should you use sewage sludge on land, or is it better to burn it? And our different members have different views on that. They will never all agree, but there's a way forward for everyone for sustainability. The second key word is dialogue, to try and make that consensus possible. And the third key word is communication, so we have some tools. What is interesting is not the tools. What is interesting is the result of trying to share information with as wide a public as possible to get people involved to facilitate networking. What do we see maybe in the coming years? Firstly, I think, and it's already been widely indicated by Joanna, by Fertilizers Europe and by others, is the current resource crisis, which is driving interest obviously in fertilizer recycling, but maybe also in dietary change. And unfortunately, that is unlikely to go away given the situation in Russia and Ukraine at the moment. The second important thing which we've introduced, but which has appeared only marginally maybe over the last 2 days, is climate and the climate crisis. We're trying to work on that. It's not easy. There are links between phosphorus and climate change, but they're less evident maybe than nitrogen, which goes straight into the atmosphere as a greenhouse gas. But there are links. We saw that in the opening session. And maybe what we need to work on is also the links between the disruptions resulting from climate, and we're seeing them in the supply chain, the disruptions in agriculture, and how that will impact phosphorus sustainability. We work, as you're aware, a lot on EU policies. I will not mention the ones which have already been talked about. Maybe one which is worth underlining is that the really boring one, which is taxonomy, which I thought for 2 years was so boring I would avoid it altogether, but I've failed, which, despite its really weird name, actually means the criteria under which the EU will be able to give money to green investment, which will have significant impact because the EU invests significant money, but may have significant knock-on impacts because investment funds are likely to borrow those criteria as such. Phosphorus recycling from sewage is in there, not phosphorus recycling from anything else. So we're under discussion in that, but that is something which is important, for example. So there's a wide range of EU policies. And finally, the actions which are coming up. Nitrogen recovery, we've started working with Olivier, you saw yesterday. I can't see where he is. And maybe more important than actions are the people. So because of COVID, after the last 2 years, we were planning to employ someone additional, and we didn't. But we now have Veronica, if you'll stand up, who you saw yesterday because she reported from one of the parallel sessions, who will be working with us from September. Olivier is working with us on nitrogen recovery, and of course, most importantly, my board, Ludwig, the president, and other board members who are here, Fertilizers Europe, Robert van Spingelen, who is here somewhere. It's you who makes the platform possible. Let's continue to take it forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think a clear list of priorities and also a few highlights on top of the many subjects we've already discussed over the past few days. We go from Chris then to Jacob Jones. Perfect, already waiting. Who's here, who's a distinguished professor of materials science and engineering at North Carolina State University, and here specifically in his capacity as director of the Science and Technologies for Phosphorus Sustainability Center. So looking forward to hearing what this new center has in store for us.
All right, well, I'm very pleased to introduce you to a recently funded academic research center in the U.S. called the STEPS Center, the Science and Technologies for Phosphorus Sustainability. STEPS is sponsored by the U.S. National Science Foundation under a prestigious center-level program called Science and Technology Centers, or STCs, which are meant to support center-level projects that are highly interdisciplinary and cross many different areas of research activity that the National Science Foundation supports. We conceived of this idea of the center in 2017. We first pitched it to NSF in a pre-proposal in 2019, and after 2 years of competition, finally had the result, which was awarded in late 2021, just last year. The initial award is for $25 million over 5 years, with an expectation by all parties that we're competitive for a renewal, and then with an expectation that we continue on in a mode of sustainability even after the lifetime of the NSF funding. To give you an idea of how far that budget stretches, in the U.S. system, it supports about 40 senior faculty members, so professors, and about 40 PhD students and postdocs. The STEPS partner institutions are shown on the map, which includes Arizona State University, which, as you know, leads the Sustainable Phosphorus Alliance and is an important partner for us. And STEPS headquarters is located in a new plant sciences building at NC State, which is a building designed to support interdisciplinary work. In 2018, the National Science Foundation published 10 big areas where they wanted to increase their investments. And one of these was called Growing Convergence Research. And NSF defines convergence research in the following way. First, it's a problem that the research is driven by a specific and compelling problem. And I think everyone in this room knows how compelling phosphorus sustainability is. And we argue that it's specific because it's a single element represented by a single letter on the periodic table. Further, that it involves deep integration across disciplines, and as you know, it crosses physical life, economic, and social sciences. So the simplest description of STEPS is this: it's a convergence research center with phosphorus sustainability as the vehicle. And that describes both the target of our work, which is phosphorus sustainability, as well as the way in which we go about doing it, which is through convergence research. Now, as a materials scientist who works in fields of nanotechnology, I like thinking about many problems as a function of length scale. And when we started articulating the problems of phosphorus sustainability to the National Science Foundation, we recognized that the problem spans 17 orders of magnitude in length scale, from the smallest scales, what we call the materials scale, to the scales at which humans interact with technology, a lot of things we've spoken about at this meeting, up to the global and regional scale. And this is reinforced to us, again, from the war in Ukraine. Now, these three categories describe the three research themes of STEPS. And importantly, STEPS research projects support basic research and are led by a senior investigator that's established in one of these specific disciplinary areas. But every project is multi-investigator and collaborative and crosses at least two, if not three, of these scales. STEPS is driven by a 25-year vision, and that is to facilitate a 25% reduction in human dependence on mined phosphates and a 25% reduction in losses of point and non-point sources of phosphorus to soils and water resources within 25 years, leading to enhanced resilience of food systems and reduced environmental damage. And I just add here, for a program from the U.S., this is a pretty bold vision given the differences in our political and environmental policy landscapes relative to Europe. I also want to use this opportunity to invite you to the 7th Global Sustainable Phosphorus Summit, or SPS, which will be hosted by STEPS in November of this year in Raleigh, North Carolina, the home of the STEPS Center. SPS, if you're unfamiliar with it, is a biennial event that was disrupted due to COVID and was last held in 2018. The call for abstracts is available on the website, and I'm just now realizing the website's not listed here. It's www.steps-center.org. That's steps-center, the American spelling, .org. So we're also hosting in the same week the Phosphorus Forum, which is an annual event organized by the Sustainable Phosphorus Alliance, or SPA. So don't miss an exciting opportunity to participate in a week named after our favorite element. Finally, I'll close with some photographs of our STEPS participants. We look forward to working with this community moving forward and hopefully greeting you in the U.S. in November for the Global SPS and Phosphorus Week. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It sounds like a very exciting new research initiative, taking more of a systemic approach that we heard Jen mention earlier. We go from North Carolina to Germany with Tabea Knickel, who heads up the German phosphorus platform. Hopefully you remember her from yesterday.
Hi, everybody. Oh. Hello. Okay. German Phosphorus Platform is a non-profit association like the European Phosphorus Platform. It's established in 2015. Actually, we have 75 members, you can see here. DPP is a knowledge and communication network of different stakeholders, a network to promote the recovery of phosphorus and the sustainable use of the recovered products. It's interdisciplinary, independent, and transparent. At DPP, we organize an annual event. It's called the DPP4, where the current status of pea recovery in Germany is explained. This year, it's on the 13th of October under the title Pea Recovery 2029, Milestone Achieved. The status of implementation of phosphorus recovery in Germany. The Sievert sludge amendment makes phosphorus recovery obligation in Germany as of 2029 or 32. Germany is therefore a pioneer of phosphorus recovery, so many technologies for phosphorus recovery are available in Germany. You can have a look at the catalog of German phosphorus platform with the European and the Netherlands platform. At the moment, both are currently updated, but yesterday there was a few points of it. At the DPP experience and future objectives, DPP as a network have written a policy memorandum with our members together, which is a comprehensive work of thesis and recommendations on the current regulation and necessary legislative and political changes. DPP is committed to ensuring that the fertilizer legislation does not conflict with the core idea of the circular economy. Perspectives, German phosphorus platform is committed to ensuring that the German fertilizer ordinance will be received in a few points, in a point of phosphorus solubility, the proof that the products will be plant available, and permissible feedstocks. Then before the DPP is recommended to ensure that the European fertilizer products regulation also will be received or will be extended by the endpoint of byproducts and the approval for biochars and hydrothermal carbonization products, which I've already reported yesterday about the session in this theme. Also, DPP is committed to ensuring that the end customers would be known about these new products, so they have to know how to use it, how good they are, and how good are the products. Sorry. DPP recommended planning the phosphorus recovery at the early stage, so no landfilling of the ash is necessary after 2029, and as early as it's possible. If we can recover phosphorus before 2029, it would be the best way we can do. So this is the way to close the phosphorus cycle. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that. And also reminding us that we have the whole European level, and then obviously a lot of developments at national level too, and sometimes, well, those intersect, often resemble each other, don't necessarily replicate one another. So yeah, various policy levels to bear in mind. We go from Germany to the Netherlands with Nathalie Tijdink, who's here representing the Netherlands Nutrient Platform, which she's been heading up since November last year. She has a background in sustainable development and environmental governance and is also working at the Netherlands Water Partnership. Go ahead.
Setting a small timer. All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Lovely to see you all, and lovely to be here in this beautiful city, to have had the opportunity to listen to you all yesterday, today, and to get to meet many of you, especially also yesterday evening. For those who were not there, you did miss some great dance moves. Not mine, but there was some really good dancing, and it was great. So back to something that I have more experience with than with dancing is the Dutch Nutrient Platform. So I will tell you about the experiences and the future objectives. The experience, I'll break it up in what is the Nutrient Platform and what do we do. So the most simple way to put it is the Dutch Nutrient Platform or Netherlands Nutrient Platform is pretty much the equivalent of the European Sustainable Phosphorus Platform. It was established in 2011, 11 years ago, starting with concerns on phosphorus and the phosphorus being a finite resource. And actually I should pay my predecessors some credit, because in 2013 they organized the first European Sustainable Phosphorus Conference, and which led to the creation of the ESPP. So since then the Dutch Nutrient Platform has been focusing more on the Netherlands itself rather than cross-border. It is a cross-sectoral network organization that is member-based, and its goal is to close nutrient cycles. So that means phosphorus, but it is also an important aspect for nitrogen and some attention for micronutrients. Within that, the main aim is to facilitate the market for recovered nutrients. Yeah, and why I hope this story that I will tell you will be interesting for you is because I assume that all of you are here to network and connect on the topic of recovering phosphate, which is also, well, what I am working on. So I hope you will see parallels with your own experiences, your own visions on connecting with other stakeholders in the sector. And I would love for you to get in touch with me afterwards if you have any ideas on how should different stakeholders connect to each other within the private sector, but also public and private cooperation. So, as I mentioned, the Nutrient Platform is a cross-sectoral network organization, meaning that it has several sectors. There's members in engineering consultancy related to water, waste and sludge management, food processing and production, and also the chemical industry, knowledge institutions, interest organizations also for those sectors. Oh, I'm saying them in the wrong order, but now are the knowledge institutions. And 2 of the Dutch ministries are also part of it. So it really brings together as well government as the industry. And so this gives you an idea of who the platform consists of. And what do we do is the Secretariat of the Nutrient Platform organizes events for all the members to connect to each other, for them to share information among each other. Furthermore, we also support explanations of regulations and produce other informative reports to all the members. And other kinds of activities that we do is try to get all the members together to also work on things as project development, so that they will subscribe, for example, for project proposal calls. For example, some years ago we set up a project development session aimed at micronutrients and recycling them, and then we really bring in stakeholders of all these different sectors together to work on answering questions with that regard. Then this has been on the experience. I hope it gives an idea of what the Nutrient Platform is and what kind of activities we have. And then I want to talk about the future objectives for the near term. We're working on the nutrient deal. It's basically a voluntary sustainability agreement. It's still in development. Because we have so many different stakeholders, it's quite difficult to get everyone in line on the same vision. But the idea is to subscribe to the set policy goals by the European Union and the Dutch government, so that everyone voluntarily sets these ambitions. We'll agree to those all. Hopefully will bring everything a step further so that the whole will be larger than the sum of its parts. And also, it will hopefully bring the government, it will show the government that the private sector is being active on this, and that they will also come forward in helping with regulation. So with that, I like to close on the future objective that we have with this nutrient deal. And if you want to discuss stakeholder collaboration, please get in touch with me, and I would love to discuss this topic with you. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you very much for that. The nutrient deal, is that like the Klimaatakkoord, the climate accord approach, similar? Yeah, indeed.
Hello, ESPC4 attendees.
Yeah. Oh.
I'm Matt Schultz from the Sustainable Phosphorus Alliance.
That's Matt, our next speaker. He's on time. Okay, yeah, I was saying the climate accord, so the Netherlands, for other policy area or other subject areas, has taken this approach of bringing together a lot of stakeholders and trying to develop a consensual way forward to ultimately meet objectives. So interesting to hear that's also happening in the nutrient space. That was Matt. So Matt's not here. Matt is ready to go online. He manages the US Sustainable Phosphorus Alliance. So back to North America. Go ahead, Matt.
Hello, ESPC4 attendees. I'm Matt Schultz from the Sustainable Phosphorus Alliance. I'm sorry that I couldn't be with you in Vienna for this wonderful event. The Sustainable Phosphorus Alliance is an analog to ESPP, only it operates predominantly in the US and Canada. Like ESPP, we are focused on trying to make the entire value chain for phosphorus more sustainable, and we have a great group of member organizations that help us advance this cause, as you see here. We do research, network building, and public education work. On the research side, we played a key role in standing up and now helping to manage the new STEP Center, especially in its engagement with outside stakeholders. You've either already heard about this center or will soon from its director, Dr. Jacob Jones, and it's the largest project in the world on phosphorus sustainability. Beyond this, we run our own ad hoc research groups and develop technical guidance on our own research products. In terms of public education, we run a webinar series and produce video abstracts, all of which are freely available on our YouTube channel. And in terms of networking, we run workshops and annual conferences in the US akin to this one, called the Phosphorus Forum. This year's Phosphorus Forum has been combined with the biennial International Sustainable Phosphorus Summit, about which many of you are already aware. The combined event, which we're calling Phosphorus Week, is being hosted by the STEPS Center and us, and will be taking place in Raleigh, North Carolina from November 1st through 4th. I'm hoping that by the time you hear this, registration will be open, but if not, it's coming very soon. And the agendas are already posted online, and you can submit your research abstracts to SBS right now by going to the site, so please do so before July 15th. I'd like to close by telling you about two issues worth tracking if you care about phosphorus sustainability in the US. First, our Farm Bill is coming up for reauthorization this next year. Among many other things, this bill governs federal expenditures for farmland phosphorus sustainability programs. Given our current political divisions, it's unclear whether a bill will even pass in 2023, and if it doesn't, many conservation programs will be simply shut down. Second is the battle over what types of water bodies are protected under our Clean Water Act. The so-called WOTUS provision of this act defines these waters, and both litigation and changing presidential administrations have shifted that definition over time. The Biden administration has recently reversed the Trump administration's more narrow interpretation of protected waters, and the US Supreme Court will rule in the next year in a case that has implication for how wetlands are evaluated for protection. With that, I wish you all a great conference and hope that you'll come to Phosphorus Week and visit us online at phosphorusalliance.org or on our YouTube, LinkedIn, or Twitter channels. Thank you.
The challenges in the US, which are of a different nature again to what we face here in Europe. So we're at 3:30. We had originally foreseen some questions. I would propose perhaps that you approach speakers individually if you have any, and that we take this last half an hour to break for coffee before the closing hour, if that's okay with everyone. I see people nodding. I don't see any arms waving. So let's do that. We'll see you back in half an hour at 4 o'clock for the closing plenary. Okay, welcome back, everyone. If I could have your attention, we're going to go into the final hour before I imagine many of you will have to, some of you may have to rush off. Others, hopefully, we will see later tonight and tomorrow. So this is the final concluding plenary ahead of the research conference, of course, which opens tomorrow for those of you who are attending that. And we're going to open with a statement from Virginia Sinkevicius, the European Commissioner for Environment and former Minister of the Economy for Lithuania, who's probably one of the most relevant commissioners when it comes to phosphorus sustainability. So he couldn't be with us in person, unfortunately, but has sent something in.
Ladies and gentlemen, a very good morning to you all, and many thanks for this invitation. With questions of food security and strategic autonomy raising up the political agenda, your conference is extremely timely. So I'll study your conclusions with care. You've asked me to say a few words about the European Green Deal and its implications for nutrient management. Those implications touch many different areas. A little over 2 years ago, the Commission adopted two major building blocks in the deal, the EU strategies for biodiversity and farm to fork. Sustainable nutrient management is important in both, as it is in the action plans for circular economy and for zero pollution. Nitrogen and phosphorus are essential, but too much of them in the environment means serious pollution of air, water and soil. And if we are honest, we have to admit that this is the situation today. Releases of nitrogen and phosphorus clearly exceed planetary boundaries. Here in Europe, we release twice as much phosphorus as the environment can absorb, and 3 times too much nitrogen. That situation needs to change. To compound that problem, for phosphorus, supplies are extremely limited. Phosphorus is on the EU list of critical raw materials. Large amounts are wasted, creating pollution and concern about future supplies. There is only one phosphate rock mine in the EU, and most of our phosphate rock comes from Morocco and Russia. And often it is contaminated by cadmium and other contaminants. The war in Ukraine is compromising supplies, and production costs for fertilizer production costs have increased dramatically. So the need for better phosphorus recycling is greater than ever before. The EU strategies for biodiversity and farm to fork set a specific target to reduce nutrient pollution in the EU. The goal is to reduce nutrient losses by 50% by the end of this decade. The strategies also announced an integrated nutrient management action plan to achieve the target for adoption this year. The plan should improve reporting and monitoring, enabling a tighter focus on pollution hotspots. It should also bring a more sustainable approach to nutrient management in agriculture and industry, reducing their impact on losses and pollution. It's a chance to step up the implementation and enforcement of existing legislation on nutrients pollution. It should also reveal and assess any legal gaps, improving the coherence of EU policy action. Through legislation like the Nitrates Directive and the Directive on Urban Wastewater Treatment, Europe has been tackling this pollution for almost 30 years. Despite some major gains, will offer new market opportunities for organic fertilizers and fertilizers from recycled nutrients. And as of 2023, the separation of bio-waste will become mandatory under EU law. That will increase the availability of high-quality raw materials for the production of organic fertilizers. But Europe still needs greater incentives to increase the safe recycling of nutrients, especially for phosphorus. With that in mind, we continue to fund research into optimizing the recycling technologies so that fertilizers are safe and efficient. The public consultation on the action plan is now underway. It's open until 26th of August, and we very much count on your active participation. We need input from citizens, businesses, farmers, academia, NGOs, and public authorities. And I have no doubt that the expert discussions at this conference will also contribute to the consultation. I hope those discussions are extremely fruitful, and I wish you every success. Thank you.
Commissioner back in Brussels. And we widen the scope now from Europe to global, with perspectives for global nutrient management being presented by Sini Kinesh Jimma from the United Nations Environment Programme, who's joining us from Nairobi, where she heads up their international waters work. And she's got a background in climate resilience with the UNDP. So I think this is a pre-recorded presentation, but normally she will be available to answer a question or two if we have one shortly afterwards.
Thank you so much for inviting the United Nations Environment Programme to this very important and timely conference and deliver a message on perspective of global nutrient management. The United Nations Environment Programme is working with governments and a wide range of partners to address the three planetary crises that the world is facing today. These are climate change, biodiversity loss, and pollution. In line with this, different initiatives have been implemented and under implementation to support sustainable use of nutrients as well as to reduce pollution from such sources. In 2012, in Manila, governments decided to sharpen the focus of the global program of action for addressing land-based source of pollution and clustered it is an intervention into three aggregated pollution categories, namely the nutrients, wastewater, and plastics, and created three global multi-stakeholders partnership platform of governments, the private sector, civil society organization, and academia to support an impactful action toward addressing the global pollution crisis. The Global Partnership on Nutrient Management was thus born out of the Manila Declaration to help address nutrient issues such as improving nutrient management and nutrient use efficiency for the healthy ecosystem. The Global Partnership on Nutrient Management roadmap of action was steered by the first global stock-taking and situation analysis captured in our nutrient world, the challenge to produce more food and energy with less pollution. This global overview was alerting our planet about the potential pollution, biodiversity loss, and food crisis way before Roxanne present its planetary boundaries crisis. Indeed, the report stated that without swift and collaborative action, the next generation will inherit a world where millions will suffer from food insecurity caused by too few nutrients, or where the nutrient pollution threats from too much will become more extreme, or where unsustainable use of nutrients will aggravate biodiversity loss and climate change. Thus, to help address the perspective of such a planetary pollution crisis, the United Nations Environment Programme, with the funding support of the Global Environmental Facility, implemented the first generation of projects entitled Global Foundation for Reducing Nutrient Enrichment and Oxygen Depletion from Land-Based Pollution in Support of Nutrient Cycles, which focuses on the development of toolbox for efficient and holistic management of nutrient flow. This modest but far-reaching project indeed provided the foundation, including partnership, information sharing, tools and policy mechanism for the government and other stakeholders to initiate comprehensive, effective, and sustainable management programs that addresses the nutrient over-enrichment from land-based sources of pollution to the coastal and marine ecosystems. The initiative also provided increased visibility to the Global Partnership on Nutrient Management platform and leveraged its role in advocating for global policy change and best practices implementation. It also underlined the necessity to further explore the best mechanism for sustainable management of nitrogen, which leads to the initiation of International Nitrogen Management System by the United Nations Environment Programme in partnership with the Global Environmental Facility. Both the Global Nutrient Cycle Management and the International Nitrogen Management System initiative laid the ground for the government's commitment to address the pollution crisis as captured in a series of the United Nations Environment Assembly UNEA resolutions, such as the UNEA 3 on pollution, UNEA 3 and UNEA 4 and 5 on sustainable nitrogen management, but also have been feeders to the United Nations Global Campaign on Sustainable Nitrogen Management, beat nitrogen pollution, and establishment of the United Nations Environment Programme Nitrogen Working Group. The Global Nutrient Cycle Management also contribute towards the development of the Sustainable Development Goals, SDG 14 indicator on nutrients pollution of the marine environment. This has strengthened the joint effort of the United Nations Environment Programme and the IOC UNESCO, as well as the research consortium for the advancement of this global agenda. Moreover, the United Nations Environment Programme, in partnership with the Global Environment Facility, have designed a project towards sustainable phosphorus cycle in lakes catchments, which will support lake ecosystem recovery through phosphorus emission reduction from land to water that improve the protection and the restoration of fresh water and the coastal ecosystem by bringing together the global lakes management and the sustainable phosphorus management communities to collaborate in actions including developing and testing sustainable phosphorus management framework that inform efficient investment and investments as well as policy coherences. In order to support the implementation of the UNEA resolutions and to ensure that the global partnership on nutrient management remain multi-stakeholder partnership with governments, the private sector, the scientific community, the civil society organization, and the UN agencies, collaboration has been strengthened to promote effective nutrient management to achieve the twin goals of food security through increasing productivity and conservation of natural resources and the environment. In line with this, the government of Denmark has recently invested resources through the United Nations Environment Programme to accelerate action that support the efficient use and management of nutrients to produce more food and energy with less pollution. More than ever, the global partnership on nutrient management reflects the need for strategic global advocacy to trigger governments and stakeholders in moving toward low nitrogen and phosphorus inputs to the human activities. It also provides a platform for governments, the UN agency, the scientific community, and the private sector to enhance partnership and forge a common agenda to mainstream best practices and integrated assessments so that policymaking and investments are efficiently nutrient-proofed to sustain a healthy environment for all. Finally, I would like to reiterate the commitment of the United Nations Environment Programme to support the global, regional, and national efforts to address the nutrients challenge. I thank you for your attention.
Okay, a remote thank you very much. And we go then to a report which was in part funded by UNEP, being presented by Will Brownlee, who made it here after a rather difficult journey, but he's here normally. Will, yes, good. And he's presenting our Phosphorus Future, which you should have found a copy of, at least executive summary, on your seats. So Will, joining us from the UK CEH, Centre for Ecology and Hydrology in Edinburgh. He's the lead author of the report, which came out very recently on the 9th of June. And yeah, I'll leave it to you to tell us more about it.
Thank you very much. So I started this trip on Sunday afternoon from a small little rainy village in Scotland. I packed up presents for everyone. And I managed to get here about 4 hours ago. So I missed the dancing last night. I'm sorry, you guys must be a bit tired. I'm a bit tired too, so we'll just try and get through this reasonably fast and painlessly. So I'm Will Brownlee. I work at the UK Centre for Ecology and Hydrology. My colleague Sinikesh just presented some of the projects that UK CH are doing, INMS there, also mentioned the new project Upcycle, which I'll tell you a bit about afterwards. But first, let's get on with our Phosphorus Future. So, our Phosphorus Future, it's, as you mentioned, funded by UNEP, also funded by the Natural Environment Research Council, ESPP also gave us some funding for the report, not the website, just the report. Also Jeff, the Global Environment Facility, and the people that did the work were the University of Edinburgh and the Centre of Ecology, but also lots and lots of other people that contributed, so I'll tell you about them in a bit. I'm really excited to be here because actually the ESPC conference in Helsinki started off by promoting our Phosphorus Future right at the very, very beginning of the project. We did this by putting out, Chris worked closely with me, putting together a global call for a science initiative on phosphorus. We called it the Helsinki Declaration. It was online for a little while. You could sign up. It's basically an online petition saying, come on, we need work done on phosphorus internationally by governments. By 2019, we had 500 scientists signed it, so that's great. It's now up on the OPF website. But a recap of our Phosphorus Future project, which is connected to the Helsinki Declaration and the report here, was basically to raise awareness, to bring together scientific evidence to support policy development and contribute to consensus development. So we did this with the main output of the project, which is the OPF report. This has been developed by 40 authors from 21 different countries. The report identifies the issues. We have a go at providing some of the solutions, and we talk about the next steps. It's underpinned by about 2,000, actually over 2,000 peer-reviewed publications, spanning over 300 years of scientific research. And the report has undergone a huge extensive review process, which took over 2 years to do. It was supported by 40 referees, and those referees came from academia as well, from industry, and also from government. So we're confident that the science is right. Here's some of the partners that contributed. We also have a foreword from Janes Potocnik, who's the co-chair of the UNEP International Resource Panel, and a preface of the chairs of the GPNM, which Sinekenesh was talking about. So what's the report like? It's around 400 pages. This is not the report. This is a summary of the report. I wasn't going to bring 200 copies of the book. What we go through in the report and the book is we set the scene, we talk about the challenges, the solutions, we have a look at regional perspectives, and then we talk about the next steps. So here's a couple of outtakes from what the actual report looks like. So chapter 2, phosphorus reserves and resource uses, quite a sensitive subjects in there. We have transforming the food system, so agriculture. We have food security. We have phosphorus water quality. We have opportunities to recycle phosphorus-rich organic materials. We have opportunities for recovering phosphorus from residue streams. That was led by Ludwig at the front here. And we have consumption, the missing link towards phosphorus security, which was led by Genevieve Metzen, who spoke to you earlier and has been here all week or weekend. So each chapter is broken down into this idea of let's talk about the challenges for each of those topics, and let's talk about the solutions. And then if you go to each chapter, you'll have a background on the subject, so a bit about agriculture, or a bit about recycling, and then it goes through each challenge one by one. So each of those challenges, challenge 2.1, challenge 2.2, for each of those topics, and then it provides the solution. So challenge 2.1 on there is answered by solution 2.1. The reason I'm going into that detail, because that structure runs through all the different products, as well as in your booklet there. So, at the end of the book, then we get to the last chapter, which isn't really in that structure, but that's talking about what we're going to do with all this information, how we're going to pull those solutions together, and how we're going to move forward. So in that last chapter, we suggest 10 key actions that we think are important. So I'm going to read these through as verbatim because there's been a lot of review on the wording. So, number 1, use more recycled phosphorus in fertilizers as an alternative or a supplement to phosphate rock. We have to optimize our phosphorus inputs to agricultural soils. So we need to feed the crops, not the soils. We need to optimize animal diets to reduce phosphorus excretion. We need to increase appropriate application of manures and other phosphorus-rich residues. We need to improve reporting and assessments of the impact of freshwater and coastal ecosystems, which you can see there's a picture there from Lake Erie. We need to implement integrated approaches to restore and protect our rivers, lakes, and coastlines. And we need to implement national to global strategies to increase recycling of phosphorus from wastes. We need to ensure sufficient access to affordable phosphorus fertilizers for all farmers. And we need to promote a global shift to healthy and nutritious diets with low phosphorus footprints. And the last one is we need to reduce the phosphorus lost as waste. We came up with sort of 4 next steps, which we think, as a community that wrote the book, would really make a big difference to moving us forward in the phosphorus sustainability global community. The first one we thought of really is an international framework. So this is a big project, a bit like INMS that you've seen there, the International Nitrogen Management System, but one for phosphorus. And the group that have worked on putting our phosphorus future together are working really hard to try and get that funding from GEF, the Global Environment Facility, via UNEP, to run something like that in the future. We're sort of in the middle of that with the project that Sini Kanesh mentioned called Upcycle, which I'm going to tell you about in a minute. We need a global commitment. So we need all the governments to agree that this is a problem and they need to do something about that. So the colleagues that I work with on the nitrogen projects, we've really pushed hard for this for nitrogen, and we've got a UNEA resolution for nitrogen. We had one of those at the last UNEA, UNEA 4, and actually just the UNEA 5.2 that's just happened, we've now got a second nitrogen resolution. So a UNEA resolution is an agreement of all the governments in the entire planet, apart from, I think, the Catholic Church is excluded, or the Vatican, that have agreed that nitrogen is a problem. In this second resolution, we managed to smuggle in the word phosphorus. So we're almost getting there. So the next, yes, that's the next. So this is the third thing, an intergovernmental coordination mechanism. And I'm going to tell you a bit about what that is. It sounds like a bit of a waffle. What that is phosphorus is such a myriad of different problems dealt with in different sectors and different agents, that what we feel is needed is a central body that can sit and try and join up the need for phosphorus to be dealt with by the different conventions. So, for example, if you have something about phosphorus and recovery and recycling, those guys may want to be talking to the people from the mining industry or agriculture. We need something to sit in the middle and really work that dialogue out. Not dissimilar to exactly what ESPP is doing, but we need something at the international level. And I guess the way that would work to get that back out to governments is that would sit in the middle, an elected group within UNEP, and then that would run up to the UNEP Committee of Permanent Representatives, which report to UNEA, which is the United Nations Environment Assembly, and then that would go maybe all the way up to the top and set targets and agendas for the governments of the planet. The other thing is we need a shared goal for improvement, and we've proposed one of these in the report, which I think you'll see in the report listed there. So this we've called the OPF 50-50-50 goal. This is a target to reduce 50% of reduction in global phosphorus pollution and a 50% increase in recycling of phosphorus lost in wastes by 2050. This is going to deal with this twin crisis of phosphorus, which is water pollution, where you have too much phosphorus. That's the Beijing Olympics. There, the army are moving phosphorus or algal blooms out of the sea there. And then food security risks. That's Afghanistan, where they have famine at the moment. Achieving this, we've done some brave calculations, and we work out that by achieving this 50-50-50 goal, we'll return 8.5 million tonnes of recycled phosphorus to farms each year. That's enough to sustain a food system that could provide enough food for 4 times our population. We'd also save the global farming community $20 billion in annual fertilizer costs that are being wasted through losses at the moment. We'd also cut pollution impacts, which, if we were trying to fix them, would cost the planet $300 billion to fix. It'll help build jobs in the green and circular economies, and it will support a transition to a sustainable phosphorus recovery and a post-COVID green recovery. And it will protect against fluctuations in some of the fertilizer price spikes that we're seeing at the moment, which are off the scale. So it's not just a report. Okay, so if you have a phone or a laptop with you now, I encourage you to go to a website, which I'm going to tell you about in a minute. So the report is on the website, but because 400 pages is a lot of a commitment to read through, we've also taken each chapter and we've turned it into what I call a visual summary. This is a scrolling story like the New York Times do. You can scroll through it. It's basically those solutions and challenges that I showed you earlier, which are listed here. It takes about 10 minutes to read for each chapter. It's very visual. You can do it on your phone. And then if you're still too busy for that, which is completely understandable, we've also reduced it into a 1.5 minute for each chapter. So you can kind of get through all of OPF in maybe 10 minutes. And also there's a public video, which is a little bit more, less science and more about what you can do as somebody, as a member of society, not as a scientist or a policymaker. And that's kind of fun. I drew some of the pictures. I managed to draw a man doing a poo on a picture, a line of phosphorus, so that's worth looking at. And one of my colleagues' son did the voiceover for it. So a real community effort. That's the website, so have a look at it now. It was launched 10 days ago, or whatever, the 9th, whenever that was. opfglobal.com. I haven't got a Twitter, I'm not really sure how it works, or Facebook, but if you can tweet it or Facebook it to any of your friends and family, that would be wonderful. We released it, like I said, on the 9th. So far we've had 400 newspaper articles mentioning our phosphorus future, which is great for a couple of weeks' work. So we genuinely hope and believe that if we can get policy support, if we can get scientific support, which we have through OPF now, and public support, so if everyone reads those papers and really enjoys the idea of doing something about phosphorus, we're going to get on-the-ground impacts. And that's what we're trying to do with this next project. It's a $2 million project funded by Jeff with UN support. So Jeff funded it, UN sort of work in the middle, and then UKCH sit at the other side. We don't know who the global project partners are because we're still picking them. It's basically working on lakes as a primary locus of environmental impact. It's working on freshwater ecology and restoration, and the idea is to turn phosphorus pollution into profit-making, cleaning up phosphorus pollution into profit-making. And we're going to test that out in a lake in Chile. So that's me. There we go. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for a whirlwind tour. Please do take the time to download the reports and read it, if not in full, at least more of it than you have in the executive summary on your seats. Thank you very much, Will. Are there any immediate questions to Will, or you can have a break and people can seek you out? You'll be here the rest of today, tomorrow?
Yeah, I'll be here. I won't be here tomorrow. I'm around today, so if
okay. Okay, he's sat right up here at the front, so come seek him out. Perhaps that's the best way to do it. And that would mean, I don't see any hands, I would propose that we go straight to our final panel then, which was going to be, which is an opportunity to try and bring everything together. Some familiar faces, some new faces. I'm wondering how we're going to organize ourselves. If all the panelists would like to come up here, and let's see if we can get you all into a space where everyone can see you. Sorry. Three. Let's try 3 and 3. I think it's going to be a squeeze otherwise. Okay. Let's do that. Okay. Microphones, I'd say, yeah, this is an opportunity if you do have any final questions to start thinking them up, and we'll have this will take us through to 5 o'clock or just after 5, so it's your final opportunity, if you like, to engage these speakers. Maybe I'll introduce you in turn as I kick you off with a question. I'd say keep your answers short, and that'll give you a chance to react to one another, and for us to hopefully take 1 or 2 contributions from the floor as well. Joanna, I thought come back to you. You left us on you gave a very interesting presentation this morning. I did think of a couple more questions just now for you, but I suppose that maybe what's useful is to leave us, so we have the implementation of the new regulation coming up mid-July, the 16th of July, And I think one of your last slides, you also mentioned what's the work that's still to be done, delegated acts, more harmonization potentially from 2024. So what for you is the, I guess, the next big thing that you're working on in the context of this regulation? No.
In the speakers? No,
yeah,
I do.
no, yeah.
Great, thanks. Yeah, to be honest, we try not to talk so much about the future right now beyond the 16th of July, because we want, we really want the stakeholders now to focus on starting to use this instrument. It could be even perfecter, of course, but it has been a bit of a moving target since it was adopted. There have been a lot of amendments which we realize have maybe been a little bit confusing, maybe put people a little bit off from getting to know the FPR. So one of the things we have realized lately is that now we focus on what we have, we focus on promoting. If I may just say, conclude by saying what I learned yesterday and today is that we have reached the fertilizers manufacturers quite well, I believe. I think some of you in this room almost fell asleep during my presentation because you've heard it 1,000 times. But I saw a lot of genuinely curious faces here also, much more than we usually do when we talk about FPR. And I think it's because that there are so many raw material suppliers here. So I think the next step for me is to not talk about future delegated acts, but really now try to reach out with what we have, and in particular with the raw material suppliers, because there I think we have a missing link, which still needs to be closed. So please help us spread the word, because I think the potential is much bigger than the fertilizers manufacturers realize. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Let's turn then. I'll move across. Heide Spiegel from the Austrian Agency for Health and Food Safety. And I guess a question to you would be, so we heard yesterday about what's going on in Austria. Interesting to hear how you fit into that, and I guess what this new regulation does for you, changes for you, challenges or opportunities it presents. As we've heard, it's a regulation, not a directive. It doesn't need national transposition. How do you see it affecting the work that you do?
Unfortunately, I was not here yesterday, but my issue is that we know that phosphorus is a limited resource, especially high-quality mineral phosphorus, and we have to use phosphorus from organic sources, such as organic farm fertilizers, but also from other sources like compost, biogas digestate or sewage sludge. The use of sewage sludge is discussed since decades, and processes for the recovery of phosphorus have been developed and discarded. And I think a promising approach is the mono-incineration of sewage sludge, and which is done or is planned by the city of Vienna, and the recovery of phosphorus from the ash, which is developed by Borealis, as we have heard today. But this process has not yet reached the stage of practical feasibility and marketability. Although the research has been done for years, and I ask myself, why does it take such a long time? And I think we have to act now to reuse phosphorus without harming the environment.
Do you have a suggestion why it's taking such a long time? To answer your own question?
I think it has to do economic factors, of course, and of course the mono-incineration is. Yeah, there are some questions, but I think research has solved them, and Yes, it's also a question to the public why it's not going into market readiness.
Okay, yeah, something maybe someone else on the panel can pick up on in a moment. Jakob, you could have a go at that, and I guess it fits. More generally, I wanted to ask you what, research into technologies like this has gone on for years. We're aware that of all the issues around our reliance on mined phosphorus. We have a policy framework in place now to promote recovery and recycling. So I guess how optimistic are you? What can really make a difference now from your perspective?
I think one of the next steps must be to look more at the value chain. I know there was somebody of our speakers today who said this as well. Next step is to look at the value chain. And I think it's partly also a comment to what you just said here, because I think we have to think about Europe as a very diverse place. So how much fertilizers you have in one area, how much you use on the fields is very different. The crops are very different. And especially the access to manure as the most P-containing organic source is very, very different. So, and it has practical consequences. So if you are recycling phosphate from Holland or the Netherlands, it makes absolutely no sense to put it on the fields in Holland because they are full of phosphorus in the first place. It needs to be transported to areas like Hungary where they have no animals and therefore much less phosphorus for the soil. So this comes to me a little bit to cooperation with industry. I think we need to think, I encourage people to try to work with industry or bigger players so you can create a value chain, so you can shift the recycled phosphate from where you generate it, where all the people are, to where you need it in agriculture. And I think this is something that industry will be willing to help you with, because we are not going to expand fertilizer production in huge lots in Europe. So part of the things, if we want to be there in 20 years and 50 years, we also need to help with solving the problems of society, and one of them is recycling. So I'm fairly sure you can find not only Borealis, but other companies who would like to help with solving this problem. So this is really what I wanted to say, that I think the next step for me is also to think more about the value chain, the recycled products, how do we bring them to where they're most useful?
Okay, thank you. Go ahead, pass the microphone along. Elsa Bühnemann, who joins us from the Research Institute of Organic Agriculture, the FIBL in Switzerland, where she heads up the Department of Soil Science, or Deputy Head of the Department of Soil Sciences, and she heads up their Nutrient Management Group. I guess for me, at least on the panel, you're the closest to a research perspective. So I don't know whether you can answer this, but my question would be, the research conference is obviously is tomorrow, so we have yet to get into that. And a lot of the discussion today has been around policy and more practical application. What would you say are the research priorities that still remain and that can ultimately help move these other agendas forward as well?
Well, what I have been missing a little bit is often a holistic perspective on the technologies. So really, a full assessment of, including life cycle assessment of all the technologies to really come to a well-justified conclusion of which technologies to invest in. And there is a lot of lack also on information on risk assessment with respect to what can be applied to soils. And what not. So there we really have a huge uncertainty, I think, and possibly underestimate also the capacity of soils to degrade some of the contaminants.
We underestimate the capacity,
yes,
rather than overestimate.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Tamsin, so another new face, Tamsin Kennedy, here from Scottish Water, where she heads up their circular economy work. So Scottish Water, wastewater services provider in Scotland. Maybe we haven't heard such loud voices from the water sector either these last few days. You're the circular economy lead. We could say phosphorus is your problem too. Talking about creating a circular economy for phosphorus. So what are you doing about it, and to what extent are you saying, yes, we can take this on, this is our job?
I don't want to get lynched when I leave here, but recovering phosphorus is just not a priority for the water industry, and I will qualify that. Our job is cleaning water and wastewater and giving it back to the people. And at the moment, it's not cost effective for us to recover phosphorus. And because we're funded by our customers and the cost of living crisis, it's something we have to bear in mind. So how do we shift that priority? Well, cost. In all my time in the water industry, not one chemical company or farmer has come knocking on my door saying, give me your phosphorus. They're not really, I don't know, there's probably lots of reasons, but there's no market there that they're coming to us saying, recover it and we'll take it. Then, so for me, it's if it becomes more if we can make money recovering it, then we'll do it. But at the moment, there isn't any money and I can't justify that cost to my customers. The other driver is legislation. And at the moment, so in Scotland, we put our sludge to land, so our phosphorus is recycled that way. There's no driver in legislation. We have compliance and we meet those. If compliance for phosphorus is increased, then we just put in more cheap chemicals. And unfortunately, that is the way of the world. I'm not saying I'm happy about it, but until some of these drivers change, recovering phosphorus is not going to be a priority. Don't attack me on the way out, please.
Okay, I'll give you a chance to. Everyone's still gathering their thoughts on how to respond to that. Give people a chance to react in a moment. Bring in the final speaker first, Peter Viven Nielsen, who's CEO of Race for the Baltic, a non-profit working towards improving the health of the Baltic Sea. So we heard yesterday from Helcom that on the whole things seem to be looking slightly better going forward, although there are still areas where things are not that good and in fact getting worse. I suppose, do you share that sentiment, and do you also, these last 2 days, have you also picked up further signs that things will continue to improve for the Baltic? Or are there things that you've missed and that you say, we're not paying enough attention to?
Well, the short answer, I guess, is no. I don't quite agree with Lotta on that, the message she sent. I think you can say there's been a lot of improvements. Mm-hmm. We haven't reached the point where we're kind of turning the tide. So to that extent, I think she was meaning that we've actually done a great deal of progress, but there's still a bit, it's roughly 7,000 tons of phosphorus missing. That's a 7,000 ton of phosphorus inflow that we need to decrease before we can turn the tide. So it's still actually getting worse every year in the Baltic Sea, but we have done a great deal already. But it's not, we need that extra 7,000 tons. I think I'm kind of adding on to you. So we come in from the environmental perspective. And that's how we kind of focused on phosphorus. I mean, within the borders of the EU, we have one of the world's most polluted seas. We have the largest dead zone in the world caused by humans. And this is mainly then because of phosphorus and eutrophication. On the positive side, we have a very strong regulation, being the Water Framework Directive. However, to my knowledge, I don't think there was a single country meeting up to the first deadline, 2015, nor was there any country meeting the deadline of 2021. Now we're facing the deadline of 2027, that's supposedly going to be the last deadline, and after that you'll be fined. And that's something I've kind of missed, or I would appreciate even more focus on, because before we start talking about new legislation, we actually already have a very strong legislation that would more or less solve the environmental issue. So that is something I would love to focus on for a phosphorus sustainability conference, what is really happening on the implementation of the Water Framework Directive. And if anyone want to join us in kind of making sure that that's being implemented, please contact us. I think that's the core essence, and that would also kind of bring many of the missing puzzles into place, because that is a very strong directive, and basically nobody seems to be able to meet it, which I think is very strange. It's like the big elephant in the room. Nobody talking about this, but it's really strong. See there.
Yeah, Joanna.
Sorry. No, since Andrea Vettori from DG Environment is not here, I just want to recall that, so I take on the DG Environment, or I take on the Commission hat now, although it's above my pay grade. And I just want to recall that in the INMAP, which Andrea Vettori spoke about this morning, the ecological status under the Water Framework Directive was indeed one of the big priorities in this INMAP initiative. So I think the Commission at least it does have some focus on using the existing legislation.
Wanted to ask a follow-up to you too, which is someone mentioned earlier today, and you mentioned it as well, actually, having looking more life cycle analysis, and someone mentioned, I can't remember who it was, earlier today, that many of these new solutions to recover phosphorus use a lot of chemicals, and are we thinking about how they align with other EU objectives like net zero, for example, and chemical sustainability in a broader sense. So is that something you, I guess, I know in the Commission everyone is working on particular regulations, directives, whatever, but how broad is your scope, and is that wider sustainability focus already being taken into account now at an early stage, that we don't find ourselves with apparent solutions later on that then have to be replaced again because they're causing unintended problems that we haven't thought of?
Yeah, I think, I'm not sure I've seen a life cycle analysis of recovered phosphate compared with mined phosphate, but I think all the pointers are that it's really much more sustainable to recover phosphate. I think and I mean, if you look at the level of the problem that eutrophication or the NMP balance consists of, when you look at planetary boundaries overall, I think it's clear that I'm just the lawyer in the gang, but so I'm not the scientist. But I think it's the priority for us of recovering phosphate and nutrients is really quite the case is quite convincing, I think, for us as policymakers, and in particular when we talk about waste streams. So we don't talk about competing land use, or I mean, when we talk about recovery from waste streams, including water, then I think the case is rather clear as far as I know.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone want to come back on Tamsin's role, or not her role personally, but the water sector's role, either on the panel or elsewhere? Anyone who shares her perspective or has a different point of view? Yeah, the gentleman all the way at the back.
Yeah, I'm also coming from the water sector, and I completely share the perspective, I have to say. And I think it's kind of a problem also a bit on this conference. We are talking a lot about recycling and recovery, and I looked just the numbers up from Kimo's dissertation. So there are in Europe around 600,000 tons of phosphorus ending each year in wastewater, which is a lot. But there are 900,000 tons, more or less, ending up in the soil and are not utilized due to fixation, etc., landing up in these pools. Each year there are more phosphorus. We're bringing more phosphorus into the system, and we're not solving the problems when we are just saying, okay, we're going now for phosphorus recycling, and then putting also our recycled phosphorus, besides some fossil phosphorus, into the system again. I think we have to be more sufficient also in terms of other solutions regarding phosphorus, and not just saying, okay, we're recycling it and then we solved the problem.
Okay, so we have to think about how much we actually apply to the soil in the first place.
And I'd like to strengthen exactly what Tamsin said when it comes to legislation. In work I've done at the Swedish Ministry of Industry, we have pushed forward a suggestion how today's wastewater treatment plant will become tomorrow's resource treatment plants, but then they need to have legislation on their side. I've also done a speech of that both at United Nations Economic Commission for Europe, WTO, and I've also had that as a key thing next week when I meet with the French presidency. So we'll try to push that from Easy Mining and Ragn-Sells side to make sure that you can be a producer in the future.
Just to reply to that, I think, I'm all for the legislation, but we have to bear in mind that the money to pay for these technologies has to come from somewhere. And when we increase the price of water, is everyone going to accept that? And I don't have the answers, but I'm just putting it out there.
Jakob, you wanted to, and then Peter.
Yeah, I think I want to make a comment on that, Tamsin, and the water colleague down in the back. We had the discussion a little bit yesterday. It depends on how you look at it. Is recovery of phosphate something you do because you deal with wastewater and it's part of your responsibility? Or is it a question of you want to compete with the price of mined phosphate? And for me, but I'm a private person, I don't have to make a business case, but it's like where I come from, water has a price and discharge of water has a price. And I think for me, it should be part of, we're trying to solve a societal problem. And therefore, as citizens, and especially in big towns where there are most people, they would have to do more to solve this crisis. So this is how I look at it. And this is also how makes it more easy for industry to take it and actually use it in the value chain. Because I would like to go a little bit further in the value chain also and say, change doesn't come because we sit here in this room and talk about it. Change in losses of nutrients comes because farmers on the ground change their practice. And I would love it to bring the farmer a bit more into the center of the discussion, to say, he has got many different options of how he wants to fertilize his field. And he can use mineral, he can use organic, he can use recycled. And he has to look at, for the crop I want to grow, with the soil I have, what is the best option? And even if some of the phosphate is not available, we need phosphate, otherwise we cannot grow a crop. So it's not enough to say that some of the phosphate is immobilized and cannot be used by the crop, absorbed by the crop now. Eventually will become available, and in any case we need phosphate, because one of the things we haven't discussed here as well is phosphate is not the only nutrient. There's also N, and there's K, and there's all the other micronutrients. And in reality, if we want to avoid losses, the real answer lies in the balance between the nutrients. And this is something maybe also that we too often talk about N, or we talk about P, but the answer is in N and P.
Peter, and then we'll go to the lady over there.
Yes, I just want to shortly comment as well that first of all, I kind of agree with the water sector that unfortunately recycling of sewage sludge is not the solution for the environmental problem as such. However, on the positive side, I think we as a non-profit organization, we meet a lot of municipalities. And I think when you meet with the municipalities, there's actually a lot of them who are out there looking for what are the solutions to deal with their sewage sludge. And they struggle with finding these solutions, and some of them are small, some of them are big, but they may not always have the kind of personnel to dedicate the time for finding those. So I think that would be a very interesting aspect of this kind of conference, to also bring the customers to the conference that that might help in solving one of some of the problems that you might face, because I see a lot of forward-leaning municipalities that actually are willing to pay in order to kind of reuse and circulate. So as a message of hope, I think that could be something forward.
Just go to the lady over there, and then we can come to you just after. Yeah, go ahead.
Thanks. Paula Linder from Finnish Water Utilities Association. You asked about what the water sector is thinking. In these 2 days, I have been thinking that there has been presentation about how to recover phosphorus after incineration. And I think there has been no discussion on the fact that in European we have quite different kind of countries, and in some countries the organic material is quite an important thing also. So there's also other routes to recover phosphorus or to recycle phosphorus also. The sewage sludge directive was mentioned earlier today, for example. And I think that's important thing to take into consideration. I come from Finland. We had quite a big country. Also in Sweden, there's lack of the organic material, and that's really important thing. The cost is really important. There is if you look at the water services, the treatment of wastewater is two-thirds of the cost of water services, and at least in Finland, the treatment of sludge is 1/4 of the cost for the wastewater treatment. So it's quite a big cost to look on how to implement new processes, and that needs to be taken into consideration when considering the new processes. And the LCA factor is really important, really important for the water sector. Thank you.
Heide? Yeah.
Regarding the phosphorus fertilization, I think most of the European recommendations, they aim a balanced phosphorus fertilization. So if the farmers do it according to the recommendations, that I think would be a good step in the right direction, also to avoid losses to water bodies.
Thank you. Yeah.
I had a pleasure to work for an authority when I dived into this phosphorus topic at all. Then I worked in the water sector, and now I'm more in the, let's say, technology recycling business. What I always notice in these type of discussions is the two big issues we still have to cope with. So that's a wrong structure in society and governance, and let's say wrong priorities in the society. So now everyone focuses on rare earth metals, electric cars, etc. Okay, you can try to eat it in 20 years, but you won't get feed. So I think we also have to really, if you want to dive into circular economy in a broader sense, we also have to reconsider the structure we are coping with. So it's not only the Commission, it's also on state level. So there are even competition between the different departments, so that they are not pulling the same strings. So they are riding horses in two different directions, and that has to be overcome. And then, of course, also policy adoption will be way faster.
Thank you. Yes, let's go here. I'm conscious we're already after 5, so we'll take a couple more. The lady back over there. If you, stand up perhaps, that'll be easier. And Elsa, in the meantime, I wanted to ask you, I saw you nodding when Jakob was talking about needing to think about a balance between, we talk about P and K. We need to think of, optimally a balanced approach. Do you, I guess I'm thinking, you align with that?
Absolutely, and the carbon. So the carbon and all the other nutrients, that's extremely important from the perspective of a soil scientist, yeah.
And is that happening?
Not really.
Okay. Okay. Yes.
So I am working for the Federal Office for Environment in Switzerland, and I now face the challenge to find a financing model for phosphorus recycling. But what I found out up to now is that phosphorus recycling will cost maybe 1 coffee per person and per year for Switzerland. So it's around €4 per year.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Yes, over there, and then.
Yeah, my name is Peter Leinweber. I'm soil scientist from the University of Rostock in Germany, and I did a lot of phosphorus research. I want to comment on the colleague who mentioned the phosphorus fixed in soil, and also I want to bring up a soil science perspective. Indeed, there's lots of phosphorus in presently unavailable form in soils. That's true. However, it's also true that this phosphorus is not unavailable forever, but it can be mobilized. And modes of mobilization are intercrops, cash crops, for instance, nitrogen-fixing legumes have the capability of mobilizing phosphorus in the rhizosphere. So I want to state that farming practice needs to mobilize the today unavailable phosphorus in soils, and there are many options to do so by crop rotations and good farming practice.
Thank you. Do you want? Okay.
My name is Nathalie Tijding. I work for the Nutrient Platform. In the discussion on the payment for recovering phosphorus from the water, I'm a bit surprised that well, maybe I understood it wrong, but it seems the assumption that the consumer of clean water will automatically be the one paying for that. This is, of course, a political discussion. What also tends to be a common principle is a polluter pays. In practice, might be difficult, but there are also, I believe, other options for this, and wanted to bring that into the discussion.
Fair point. Thank you very much. I think we're going to have to wrap up soon. Can I see a show of hands if there are people who still want to ask a question or make a point? 1, 2. Okay, we'll make those two the final interventions. Yes.
Hi, Mohamed Hakim from Belgium, TTBS. We are developing new process for phosphoric acid and its salt from the fly ashes or sludge. My question is regarding the legislation. If our products meet all the limit standard for feed or food application, it is possible to use it, or we have to focus only in fertilizer application and technical? What is the status of legislation to apply the phosphorus, recovered phosphorus, as phosphoric acid or its salt, calcium or ammonium phosphate to the feed and food?
Joanna, could you answer that? Or have a go at answering that? Alternative destinations, or Jakob otherwise?
I'm not sure I correctly understood the question, and I'm not an expert in feed and food legislation at EU level, but I heard that several times today, that several of the participants here have said that it's very difficult to use recovered phosphorus for feed and food. I just have to take note of that. I can't answer that.
Anyone else answer? Yeah, I understood the question to be if you alternative uses for recovered phosphorus, and what's the legislative framework like for food and feed as opposed to it going into fertilizer? Is there? Okay, there's a very enthusiastic hand here. We'll get you a microphone.
Yeah, the short answer is no. Because your material comes from wastewater, and there's a feed regulation clearly stating every material out of wastewater is not allowed to be recycled in feed. Food, of course, will be kind of higher level, so I don't expect that will be easier. So, but as far as we know, DG Sante has it on the table now. So let's see how long it takes to adapt, or at least to consider at least the purified phosphates for feed application. So the big gap here is really the discrepancy or discrimination by origin and not by quality. So I think we have to switch from origin discrimination towards quality.
Okay, thank you. Okay.
Thanks. Okay, my name is Bianca Dess. I'm a soil scientist in Tasmania, Australia. So my question is a little bit left field. It's trying to bring the concepts that we considered at the beginning of the conference yesterday about the responsibility or social responsibility towards the rest of the world for producing food, and that, I guess, from my perspective in sort of Oceania, yeah, I guess maybe I can offer some perspective, but I guess I'm trying to understand what is the scope for if there's a net gain of phosphorus in Europe and there's not necessarily a known way of how to use the phosphorus most efficiently, like why can't it be transported, you know, back to the countries that are exporting the food to Europe? So if there's a net loss of phosphorus from Brazil, perhaps some of the extracted, refined and safe products can go back to Brazil to sustain their soil, and maybe there's a social responsibility aspect. There's definitely parts in Africa where there are red soils that are highly phosphorus sorbing, which crying out for fertilizers can basically never really get enough. So I just, yeah, it's a bit of a left field question, but I want to know if there's interest, scope, drive, initiative. Thank you.
Yeah. So it's taking what you mentioned, Jakob, but expanding it to a global level. To what extent can we match up supply and demand globally? And maybe there is, as you say, a social responsibility to think in those terms. Is there anyone who has a yes?
Yeah, maybe we should be importing less feed from outside Europe in the first place. But I think, yes, it would be a very good idea to return the phosphorus that we are in fact importing.
Anyone else? Yeah, Joanna?
I think that's an excellent additional argument for increasing the recycling of phosphorus in Europe as much as we can. Because the truth is that we don't only import the feed, we also import the phosphate rock to Europe. It's not like we have a big excess here. So, but that's an excellent, the social responsibility is indeed an excellent additional argument for increasing our efforts for phosphorus recycling. While I have the floor, on economic incentives, I think the polluter pays principle is also an excellent point. You know, it's not necessarily the water users who should pay for this phosphorus excess. So this, I think, you know, without announcing anything or taking any commitments, but I think this is really something that we are also thinking about for. You know, for our more medium and long-term policies on phosphorus in the EU.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, you're not supposed
I would like to have two comments here. So for me, the polluter pays means that the consumers of water, they have to also pay for the recycling of phosphate in the water. Because I do think you cannot just say because we eat food and the food comes from agriculture, it's agriculture's problem. So for me, that is part of also the societal balance we have between cities and countryside. So for me, that's one important point. The other point about recycling phosphate back to countries, I think the main point is we get most of it from Brazil in terms of, as you said, the protein feed for livestock. And it's not so easy to just ship that back. I think sometimes we can come up with ideas, but with fertilizers and crops and food, we're talking about millions of tons, and it's not so easy to do that in practice. I think the most obvious in order to reduce it in Europe is actually if we would do more protein feed ourselves, we wouldn't import so much, and by importing from South America, we import a lot of nitrogen and a lot of phosphate. And that is the truth, and that's for me the most obvious solution, because otherwise, shipping it back, I can't see the logistics in this.
Okay, we want to wrap up. I see more hands going up. You are not supposed to have a microphone, but you have one, so.
Okay, great, thank you. To comment on the global situation, what we met with Sri Lanka at COP26, and they announced then the fantastic solution to go organic. And everybody knows now afterwards they couldn't afford to import fertilizers. And so we need to make sure that we can produce enough fertilizers wherever in the world where we exist. So we need to make sure that we can recirculate on a national level. And we met them at the Stockholm Plus 50 as well. And the intention, if when they are building their first wastewater treatment plant in Colombo, they should of course produce nitrogen fertilizer, not destroying the nitrogen.
Thank you. And Will?
Yeah, I was just going to add, there's a paper by Helena Kaluluto from the Stockholm Centre that shows the economics of returning phosphorus, recovered phosphorus from wastes with reverse logistics of mineral fertilizer trade. Works, it's economically completely feasible. And the other thing I was just going to say about this idea of consumers paying and all of this sort of stuff, it depends what timescale you're looking at. Because the consumers ultimately, or everyone ultimately, is going to pay in the long term because the costs of eutrophication are so massive. So the idea of not doing this and not doing the problem now is, I think, fairly myopic, because in the end you're going to end up with a eutrophication problem that society is paying for in loss of ecosystem service, which far outweighs the cost for water cover or better fertilizer management.
Thank you, and I'm going to close it there. I wouldn't have thought at 5 o'clock on the second day 2 of the conference you'd have so much energy left. So that's a tribute to you all for your engagement, the speakers up here, but also all of you. So a big round of applause. So thank you to everyone for your participation the last 2 days. It's not over yet. We've got the social event this evening. For those of you who registered for that, 7 o'clock here or in the hotel lobby. And of course, the field trip tomorrow. Do come and see Ludwig if you haven't received the form, or you have questions about filling it out, or how to make sure you definitely have your place at Wien Energie tomorrow. So Ludwig's just here. And the research conference starts tomorrow at 9 a.m. as well, if I'm not mistaken. So don't stay out too late. Make sure you're back. Ludwig, any final words from you?
Thank you. I can come here. Yeah, so it's my turn now to close the conference and to wrap it up. And if I think of our opening statement, Franz Josef Rademacher said he made two provocative statements. First, we are only talking and not doing anything. And I think this conference has proven that this is not true. There's a lot of consolidation, a lot of implementation going on. Different technologies are really being developed and being implemented. We are at the point of implementation, and it's happening. So we are not only talking, we're also doing. The second statement is very close to our discussion now about the accounting systems. And we are transiting from a linear to a circular economy. And transiting from a linear to a circular economy also means transiting our accounting systems. And we have still these myopic accounting systems. So who pays for cleaning the Chinese Sea before Olympic Games, or who cleaned the Guanabara Bay in Brazil, in Rio de Janeiro? So the army is going there and cleaning. And if we have flooding in Germany like last year and hundreds of millions are spent, nobody says we have to pay more for our pollution. And this is emissions, CO2 emissions, but also, of course, pollution. So we have to look at wider cycles of accounting, not looking at wastewater treatment and saying, okay, if we recycle phosphorus, we have to pay for one more coffee per year of doing this. But we avoid eutrophication. We probably avoid having the army cleaning the sea or the lakes. We have Lake Erie as a good example of dramatic eutrophication. But we are also cleaning the beaches in Brittany before the season. So the community pays it already, but it's not the polluter who pays, we all pay it without knowing it and without being asked if we want to pay it. So we need to look at the different accounting system, and then the whole economy will look different. So this is just my concluding reflection. And otherwise, I can only say, I can only thank, of course, all of you for coming, all the contributors. And if I start with the contributors, I talk about our sponsors, Borealis, Easy Mining, and particularly the city of Vienna with all the organizations like Wien Energie, like WKU, like IBS Wien, and of course the MA48, our waste management department of the city of Vienna. I thank, of course, our direct active contributors, those who have contributed with their posters, with their talks, but of course also the organizations that were behind, ETA Florence, who provided a lot of logistics and technical support, ESPP, who provided the whole programming and publication dissemination support, and last not least, Broman and my small team, and including my family, who contributed to the conference. So I thank you all very, very much, and I think we have to continue, and we are on a good path. We can be rather optimistic that we will achieve something. Thank you.